Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Dirks, and on behalf of ACRL and Choice, I'd like to welcome you to today's program, Across Curricula, Primary Sources in Humanities Are Gaining Steam, which is sponsored by ProQuest. Today's discussion is one in a series of sponsored webinars from ACRL and Choice that addresses new ideas, developments, and products of interest to the academic library community. Free to users, these structured 60-minute live presentations provide the opportunity for interactive discussions of important new issues and developments in academic librarianship by librarians, vendors, authors, and other interested stakeholders. Before we begin, I'd like to point out a few features of the webinar software. You should be able to follow along with the presentation materials in the main area of the screen. Along the right-hand side, you should see a Q&A panel or a chat panel. If you don't, you can click the button along the middle of the bottom of your screen that sort of looks like a dialog cloud to open up the chat. And to find the Q&A, you can click the three dots button right next to that chat button. At the end of this presentation, we will have some time to answer your questions, so please do send them in throughout, and we'll hold them until the end and get to as many as we have time for. If you experience any technical issues, please use the chat panel to let me know, and I'll troubleshoot the issue with you privately. Today, we're using the hashtag ACRLChoiceWebinars. So if you've got another screen handy, shout out to us. We're at choice_reviews on Twitter. Also note that we are recording today's session, and everyone who registered should receive a link to the archived version in a follow-up email. Our speaker today is Barbara Olson, and Barbara is Lead Product Marketing Manager for ProQuest, responsible for the 400+ primary sources and historical collections in the ProQuest portfolio. Barbara has over 30 years of marketing experience that includes digital marketing, database marketing, and market research. At ProQuest since 2011, she has held many roles, including managing the North America product marketing team. And prior to coming to ProQuest, Barbara was the marketing director at the University of Michigan Business School, Executive Education. So with that, we are ready to get started, and I will pass the ball over to you, Barbara.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Mark. Good afternoon, everyone. As Mark mentioned, I'm Barb Olson. I do product marketing for ProQuest. I'm responsible for all of our primary sources and historical collections. And today I'm going to be talking to you about why humanities are gaining steam with STEM students and researchers, and why primary source materials are important to the fields of STEM. Sorry, I'm looking for my button that's gone away to forward this. Mark, I'm having trouble finding the button that was on my screen to advance my slides.
Sure. So if you mouse over to the left-hand side, are you able to see the little pill there with the numbers?
I actually have that open on the left-hand side, so I see all of my slides. I just lost my button to be able to forward them.
Yep, so if you click the
I don't want that.
down arrow on that pill, that should advance the slides for you.
Sorry about this, I'm not seeing that.
Okay, here, let me try one thing real quick, Barbara. One moment.
Okay. Got it. Okay, I'm there. Sorry. Ready? Mark, I'm ready to go on.
All right, great.
Okay, great. Okay. Sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so I'm going to start my talk today sharing some research results around primary sources, when and how faculty use them in their own research and teaching, why they're important for students to use and understand across all disciplines, including science, technology, engineering, math, law, medicine, and more. I'll share some examples of research and articles we found that prove that point, and then wrap up with a brief discussion on how you can provide access and/or ownership of these materials to your end users. Pick up any educational journal, attend a conference, or read a blog post, and you're sure to run into the debate about how to educate today's generation so your graduates get jobs. It's all about STEM. Students have been encouraged to take up studies in science, technology, engineering, and math because, frankly, that's where the jobs are. And technology touches every aspect of our lives. And in turn, technology touches the other aspects of STEM. As a result of this shift towards STEM, we've seen fewer and fewer students signing up for liberal arts degrees. Departments of art, literature, philosophy, and more, which once offered basic studies courses required by all students, have suffered severe budget cuts at universities around the world. I'm not quite sure that the tide is turned, but there is a glimmer of hope and evidence that STEM employers are hiring workers with humanities backgrounds, and STEM faculty are pushing hard for their students to have the basic courses that students were once required to take, like writing, literature, history, foreign languages, and more. This idea of the arts intersecting with STEM is not new. Let me share a couple of quotes from leaders of two of the greatest companies to develop the technology products that drive our lives today, that being Apple and Microsoft, where Steve Jobs says, "It's in Apple's DNA that technology alone is not enough. It's technology married with liberal arts, married with humanities, that yields us the results that make our hearts sing." And Paul Allen, the co-founder of Microsoft, says, "In my own philanthropy and business endeavors, I have seen the critical role that arts play in stimulating creativity and in developing vital communities. The arts have a critical impact on our economy and are an important catalyst for learning, discovery, and achievement in our country." You all know that primary sources are important. If you're a librarian or a faculty, you've either helped students with assignments where they were specifically told to find some number of primary sources and use them to complete their assignment, or you were the one that gave them that assignment. You know it's important for students to be able to discern between a primary source and a secondary source. And so we wanted to dig a little bit deeper and try to get at the why to this question. So ProQuest launched a survey last year, specifically to faculty, asking them what resources they use in their own research and teaching and why they use them. So first, they told us what they used in their own research and what they assigned in teaching. We then asked only those faculty that checked any one of the primary sources options for teaching, so like any of these content types that you see in front of you, and asked them why that they assigned those resources to their students. And here's what we found out. So the answer scale was extremely important, which was a score of 5, to not at all important, which was a score of 1. And what you see before you are the percentages of faculty that said either extremely important or very important to any one of those answer lists. And we can see that 98% of the faculty said developing critical thinking skills was extremely or very important in their students. There's some other great results here as well, all of them directly tied to this development of critical thinking skills, such as providing a greater understanding of the topic that's being studied, to allow students to work with original sources, or to allow students to come to their own conclusions, to develop a grounding in history to better question the interpretations that secondary sources are making. And then of last or least importance was driving outcomes in the classrooms or the students getting better grades. It was really all about developing these critical thinking skills for their students. I'm sure most of you are aware of the Ithaca research that gets done, but every third year, Ithaca does a survey specifically to faculty, and they've been doing this survey since 2000. The 2015 survey focused on many things, but relevant to the topic we're discussing today is the way faculty are thinking about teaching and learning. Faculty believe that librarians play an important role in helping students find and evaluate scholarly information and make use of a range of both primary and secondary sources, helping to develop these important research skills. In another Ithaca survey that's done to librarians on the alternate years that they're not doing the faculty survey, this particular survey, when asked how important it was that the library provide different functions, librarians considered most important that the library help undergraduates develop research and literacy skills. Interestingly as well, it was also deemed important for the library to support and facilitate faculty teaching and activities. Some of these activities may be where librarians are working directly with faculty to embed certain content right into the class curriculum. I found some research results from a study done at the University of Denver, where they found that students were more engaged in that class where the primary source is actually embedded in the curriculum and valued the experience of using primary sources, and by using them, gave them a deeper understanding of their topic, as we've previously mentioned. Here's a research study done by GIST, which is the Consortium of Higher Education Institutions in the UK. And they were asking faculty in the UK about why they thought primary sources were important. And again, this idea of critical thinking bubbled right up to the top, where they're saying primary sources allow researchers to identify questions, examine evidence, and draw their own conclusions. And why faculty think it's important is because they really believe that primary sources do a wonderful job in inspiring new thinking in their students. It helps them do a better research paper, but it also helps them either narrow in on their topic or think about their topic in different ways. Going back to the Ithaca faculty study done in 2012, you can see here that 98% of humanities faculty are assigning primary sources in their teaching. 95% of those faculty are doing that in the upper division institutions and around 80% at the lower, but they're using primary sources just as much as pretty closely to how they're using scholarly articles, but certainly more important or more often than they're assigning other kinds of resources. So this graphic you see in front of you is something I designed earlier in this year at our global sales conference, and I'm trying to help our sales team talk to our customers about the value of primary sources. And some of the statistics I've already shared with you here today. But an interesting one as well is this idea of what employers have to say. So 93% of employers say that critical thinking, clear communication, and the ability to solve complex problems is more important than a student's undergraduate degree. In 2015, ProQuest partnered with JISC on a research study conducted by the Oxford Internet Institute on the impacts of digital collections to research. Although the focus of that research was about the value that large corpus collections bring to an institution and its researchers over time, there's still some interesting findings in this research that apply to what we're talking about here today. Both our early English books online and the House of Commons parliamentary papers were studied in this research. And we're seeing that usage has been increasing for both of those products since they launched more than 20 years ago. EBO's usage doubled from 50,000 page views a month to 100,000 page views a month between the years 2005 and 2008, and then doubled again to 200,000 page views per month between the years of 2011 and 2015. The usage in parliamentary papers is less dramatic and not nearly in the volumes of EBO, but the usage is still in an upward pattern. What we found in this research was that the content was finding new audiences outside of only humanities researchers. Citations data was taken from Scopus and Google Scholar, and we found a good range of disciplines using this content beyond history and English literature, and found evidence of researchers of law, economics, and some of the harder sciences. This is an example of another research project we did with the Oxford Institute and Dr. Eric Meyer, who is now the Dean of the School of Information at UT Austin. When Eric conducted this 2015 research, he had also looked at the New York Times as one of those large products that were used by researchers over a long period of time. He found some interesting patterns he felt were worthy of further study and embarked on this additional research. The research objectives in this project were to better understand the importance of newspapers and scholarly articles and identify trends across newspaper titles and subject disciplines. The scope was to evaluate and analyze citations of 4 key newspaper titles in scholarly journal articles between the years of 2000 and 2017, again using Scopus as the source. The titles we looked at were New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and The Guardian. Dr. Meyer conducted all this data collection and analysis. He wrote the paper, which has since been published in SSRN, and I'm happy to share any of the links of his research reports with you. But basically what we found was the use of newspaper sources in research is growing. And for each newspaper analyzed, the uses span disciplines, of course, from social sciences to arts and humanities, but we also saw significant usage in other disciplines like business, economics, finance, psychology, and even health sciences. Each newspaper showed distinctive patterns, which I'll talk to you about. I'll show you some slides on the distribution of the different subjects. But we also found the geographic location had some interesting trends as well. So this is just the graph that shows this exponential usage of, and certainly New York Times has a much steeper curve than the other titles that we looked at, but certainly this is evidence that newspapers and scholarly research is on the rise. And so this is looking at the different subjects within Scopus. So let me explain what we're looking at here. When I first looked at these maps, I thought I was looking at a geographical map, but actually it's not. It's a data visualization of the subjects of the journals that are found in the Scopus database. And so what he ended up doing then was overlaying each title and color coding it so you could see the distribution of the different subjects. So I'll just give a brief overview of what some of these subjects are because this slide might be a little hard to read. So in the bottom left, and I'll work around the New York Times map counterclockwise. So the pinkish color in the bottom left are arts and the humanities and social sciences disciplines. So those are all the different journals that are in that subject matter. So the dots, the larger the dots get on this map is their relationship to these journals citing each other. So again, the pink is arts and humanities. To the right there, the green, that particular green is psychology. And the blue above that is health professions and nursing. And then to the right of that is the red, which is medicine, neuroscience, biochemistry, and pharma. And then the darker green above that is agriculture and biological sciences. The orange above that is, where's my orange? Energy, environmental science, and chemistry. And then in the middle of that orange, you see sort of a pea green color. That's the earth and planetary sciences. To the left of that is the pink, which is computer science. And below that purple is business management, accounting, economics, finance. So you can see just the New York Times alone has a wide distribution of subjects outside of the arts and humanities where the New York Times is being cited in those journals. And then the other three newspapers that we looked at, you can see their graph. So The Guardian has a fair amount of purple, red again is the medical research. A Wall Street Journal has a large amount of purple, which is, of course, business management, economics, finance, which is what we'd expect to find there. And Washington Post has a nice distribution across all the disciplines as well. So that shows our subject distribution. So this intrigued me a little bit, so I wanted to dig a little bit deeper and start looking at some of these journals that were citing these different newspaper titles. So I found a few examples, which I want to share with you here. So the one on the left is Oncogene. So from 2000 to 2017, Oncogene had citations from The Guardian, and those articles were again cited another 3,200 times, which resulted in an average of 56 citations per publication citing The Guardian. So Oncogenes, I had to figure out what this journal is. It's a peer-reviewed scientific journal published by Nature Publishing, which addresses cancer cell genetics and the structure and function of oncogenes. According to the journal Citation Reports, this particular journal received a 2017 impact factor of 6.8. But also it ranked in different ways. So it ranked 33 out of 292 journals in the category of biochemistry and molecular biology. It ranks 26th in the oncology category. It ranks 32nd in cell biology and 15th in genetics and heredity. So interesting use of The Guardian in this, clearly this medical journal. The example in the middle, which is the survival journal, I found lots of citations of Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and New York Times. And those articles, again, got recited another 2,200 times. So I had to figure out what the survival journal was all about. You can see, they're talking about water purification, remedies, things like that. Survival is a scholarly international studies journal of the International Institute for Strategic Studies, the British International Affairs Research Institute. This particular journal has been around since 1959. And then my last example is the American Journal of Public Health, which is where I found, on average, 41 times per publication citations of the New York Times. This particular journal is a monthly peer-reviewed public health journal published by the American Public Health Association covering health policy and public health. So some interesting examples of how news titles are being used way outside of the humanities and social sciences. So this got us thinking, the product managers at ProQuest thinking, what should we be looking at other primary sources content types that faculty told us in our earlier study that they use in their own research and teaching, like government documents, archival collections, historical periodicals. We started looking at some of those other content types to see if we could find similar patterns. And when we looked at our periodicals, we found over 260,000 dissertations and scholarly articles that cited a short list of historical periodicals. So some of the ones that we looked at were not our big multidisciplinary collections like Periodicals Archive Online, if you're familiar with that collection. Instead, we looked at specialty collections. We looked at things like Art and Architecture Archive. We looked at Country Life Archive, which pages are filled with articles on the great houses of Britain and landscape architecture and British society. We looked at Entertainment Industry Magazine Archive, which is film, TV, radio, and the stage. We looked at Education Magazine Archive, which has got great titles in there from the US and UK. We looked at a couple of fashion titles, Harper's Bazaar, again, from the US and UK. We looked at Vogue. We looked at a news magazine archive where the lead title is Newsweek, but there's 11 other well-known international titles on policy and politics in that collection. We looked at religious magazine archives, and then we looked at women's magazines, some consumer titles like Ladies' Home Journal, Cosmopolitan, Town and Country, Parents Magazine. So these were consumer magazines that are originally considered scholarly in nature, but you can see they're being used in scholarly research. So we found that to be quite interesting. So this is a visualization of what this research was showing us on the social sciences side. I'll explain these rings. So the inner ring is the broader subject category, so literature, arts, history, that sort of thing. And then the further out the rings get more and more specific. So for instance, on the inner ring, if we were looking at history, the middle ring would be something like women's history, Black history, early modern history. And then the outer ring in the Black history case would be something on civil rights, slavery, Civil War, that sort of thing. So that's how these that works on this one. And here's the non-social science graph, similar sort of way it's set up. But we found citations in SciTech, health, and business. So again, some really nice evidence showing that these primary sources, content types, and collections are being used by researchers outside of the disciplines of humanities. This is our ProQuest History Vault product, and Daniel Lewis is on the call with us today. Did a quick search on eBook Central and found some citations specifically for ProQuest History Vault, which is what we were pleasantly surprised to find because we expected to find either the microfilm collection that some of them go into ProQuest History Vault. We expected to find the microfilm collection being the citation, but instead it was for the product itself. Even though these books are still historical in nature, they also are dealing with other topics like accounting in one case, real estate in another. So again, some good examples of archival primary sources that are being used outside of the humanities. So sometimes our customers ask us to help them make the argument internally when they're trying to place a product into their library that they're asking for help from other departments outside of, the humanities, the social science, and history, because that content can be used by other researchers in their institution. So they ask us for things like this to be able to say, hey, can you help me describe how early English books, for instance, can be used outside of the humanities or history department. And so we can find examples that show that certainly there's lots of science content in EBO. There's lots of medical science information in EBO, law, mathematics, philosophy, geography, that sort of thing. And here's another example on British periodicals, same sort of thing, performing arts, lots of really cool advertisements and things in there for researchers of business and marketing. There's music, religion, architecture, all kinds of things in British periodicals. This is an example of our History Vault product again, so environmental studies, sociology, political science, but one of the interesting ones here, historical sci-tech. So we took this from our Thomas Edison papers, and so perhaps more than anyone, Thomas Edison integrated the worlds of science, technology, business, and finance. His life, work, and visions are documented for scholars through rare laboratory notebooks, diaries, business records, and other related materials. His work laid the foundation for the age of electricity, recorded sound, and motion pictures. So again, a nice example for our customers. And this just gives me an opportunity to show you some of the beautiful images that we find within our early European books product. You can see that there's music here. This is an image of maps. So when they're thinking about geography and exploration and discovery, they've got beautiful illustrations in early European books of some maps. And then in this particular image, the one on the right, is Euclid's discussions on geometry, and the annotations on the side there are actually made from Galileo. So some fun stuff there as well. Here's another example within Scopus of a medical researcher from the School of Medicine using EBO in his research, and a couple of other examples of EBO and Scopus of researchers of language, computing, dentistry, and accounting. So again, some fun examples and some really nice evidence of the uses of these materials beyond humanities. So let's get into some of the examples I was talking about earlier, and this is conversion of the arts and humanities with STEM. The examples I'm sharing today are meant to be illustrative of the importance of the humanities even to STEM students, and that many authors have been commenting on this topic lately. We found an article by a professor at Ryerson University, Richard Lackman, a computer scientist who also studies digital culture. Professor Lackman believes that our educational system should engage students with issues of ethics and responsibility in science and technology, and treat arts and humanities courses as a necessary discussion of morals, values, ethics, and responsibility. So as graduates of engineering and science programs land high-paying jobs in high-tech startups, an important question he poses is, are these graduates properly equipped to engage with problems where their solution will impact a large number of citizens, yet not improve the lot of those citizens? For example, computer scientists are writing software algorithms for applications with far-reaching and life-altering impacts, such as criminal sentencing and employment, where racial bias or other special interests can be masked, hidden in the mysterious black box of code, and potentially protected by IP law. In biotechnology, conversations on germline editing are taking place, and while the genetic edits affect the patient, those edits impact future generations. Certainly, scientific and medical breakthroughs greatly benefit us, but the risk is there for us to sometimes not realize potential negative impacts, and therefore debates go on about gene drives and whether we are short-circuiting nature's checks and balances and moving faster than natural evolution. And then there's the issue of climate change through geoengineering, where massive scale edits are being made to our planet's fundamental systems. These are not simply technological issues, they are ethical ones. These issues require debate and discussions. Professor Lackman believes that we need to be sure that our STEM graduates who are working in fields that are changing so quickly that they can scale projects after basic research with rapid prototyping and production pipelines are asking questions about ethics, and can engage with the toughest questions of our time. What, where, and how should we? Professor Lackman proposes that STEM curricula expand to include more humanities courses to equip students with the ability to say whether we should develop certain technologies at all, and goes on to say that scientists should include the world of policy and social impact in their remit. Students will need the critical thinking skills we've talked about earlier to think about and discuss the impacts of their work on the rest of the world. He contends that arts and humanities curriculum is needed to teach empathy, ethics, and citizenship. Another example taken from an article I found in edsurge.com, which is a summary of the discussions that took place at a recent Learning Revolutions conference about the Fourth Industrial Revolution, describes at the time when new technologies blur the physical, digital, and biological boundaries of our lives. Recognizing that our current world is shaped by technologies like artificial intelligence, 3D printing, and bioengineering, questions were posed about how society should prepare its current students and tomorrow's workforce. A popular response among policymakers and professionals was to increase STEM and computer science skills, but a panel at the conference pushed back and instead recommended a curriculum that included philosophy, ethics, and morality education. Alan Goodman, who is the president of the Institute of International Education, states, and I quote, "Moral judgment and ethics could be as revolutionary as AI in this next revolution, just as the internet was in the last revolution. Those building technologies that can potentially transform societies at scale may be the ones who most need a strong moral grounding." Karen Wong, who is the director of development at a robotics education company, calls attention to the ethical quandary of the computer programmer who writes the program for the situation of an autonomous vehicle where it must make one of two choices: kill its 2 passengers or the 5 pedestrians on the road. While both options are horrible, the reality is it's a live person who will program that machine. The push to develop AI has raised concerns over automation and the impact on jobs and employment. Humans have always worked, and employment is not only about earning a living, but it is a social enterprise where we engage with other people. When we educate people in AI and the technologies of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, should those engineers and scientists be designing machines specifically to replace human work? One educator at the College of Ghana states that he has never read any history books where whole societies were not working, and believes that it is critically important to have history and philosophy as part of the curriculum for someone being educated as an engineer, and educating people who will create a society that is livable, social, and where human interaction is important. We hear it all the time. We read it in the news. A degree in liberal arts just doesn't pay, and jobs just simply don't exist. Just 1 in 20 of all college degrees are now in the humanities and liberal arts, down from nearly 1 in 5 in the 60s. But there is significant evidence that educators, employers, professionals, and others agree that humanities do matter. A sampling of evidence of this includes a former ballet dancer, now a mechanical engineering PhD student at Stanford, is doing research with robots, researching how teaching robots graceful movements of a ballet dancer can make robots seem less intimidating, less scary to the human race, a fear that is very real in people that robots will one day take over. A director of undergraduate advising and research at a respected academic research institution has watched enrollment drop in history, philosophy, literature, and other liberal arts, still believes that the skills these subjects provide are needed in the modern workforce. Employers look for skills such as thinking clearly, writing well, working well with others, understanding diversity, and working in groups that courses in humanities provide. If you look at senior leaders in today's companies, you'll find them that they've studied literature and history. The founder of Pinterest was a political science major. The founders of Airbnb studied design and art. You will find leaders in these companies are people who have the ability to take a step back, ask the right questions, and have the ability to empathize with their customers. These are skills learned through humanities. Our research yielded many more examples similar to the few that I've shared with you here today, and I want to thank my colleagues at ProQuest for helping to uncover all of these great examples. So I mentioned when I started earlier that ProQuest has been thinking about how to bring these primary sources to market for our customers in a variety of ways. We've heard from you that you're challenged with this competing mission internally where to provide products for access, where you just want to have access to them versus wanting to own them. And so we've come up with a couple of different options for our customers to be able to either combine those things or have one or the other. So we've got a couple of models that allow you to get access to more than 350 products, but also have the ability to buy some of those if you want to own them in your institution. And certainly there's always the option of just buying products to own if that's still a goal or important in your institution, versus just models where you can access these products without buying them. So if you're interested in learning more about any of these buying models, I'll provide my email address at the end, and you can send me an email and I can connect you to your account manager. But as a follow-up to today's webinar, we've written a couple of articles that continue this discussion about this intersection of humanities and arts with STEM. And our first paper is one that talks about 3 perspectives on the value of humanities education in STEM. And the second paper is more about bridging the gap between humanities and STEM, and hope that you'll find these papers interesting. So that's what I have today. I do want to offer the fact that any of the research that we've worked on with Dr. Meyer and the Oxford Institute, I'm happy to provide those links to you. As I mentioned, if you're interested in learning any more about the buying models, I'm happy to connect you with someone in sales. But I'd like to open it up to questions, and then you can see on the screen we've got our last polling question. If you could take a few seconds to answer that, that would be appreciated. And so, Daniel, I'll just ask you if there has been any questions in chat that we can address.
Yes, there's no questions submitted so far.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, then I just want to thank you very much for giving us time today. Oh, there is a question? Okay.
Yeah, I see one in the chat, actually. Let's see. How can we speak about these holistic topics to faculty who are often hyper-focused without sounding like we don't understand the academic rigor of their individual studies?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I would share some of these examples, and I struggle myself with sometimes talking with faculty because they are so focused on their own thing. It's a good question. I'd like to actually ask some of my colleagues internally about how they are doing it with some success, and see if I can come back with some sort of response to that. It's a good question, though. Very good question. Anything else there?
Okay, now I'm seeing a lot of them.
Okay. Hopefully I can answer some of them.
Okay, in the examples of journals citing newspapers, could you talk about how and why they were citing them?
We could look up the individual dissertations and how they were using that content, but this particular research was actually just looking for the presence of those citations. So I could go back to Dr. Meyer and see if he's got anything more in his research, but in reading his paper, I don't remember getting into the why of why they chose that particular title. It's just the fact that they did. Right.
Okay, then we have one person who's just interested in access to the article, so they should, they'll be, yeah, okay.
The citations for all of the examples that I provided are in the slide deck, in the notes of the slide deck, so you can actually access where I got all the articles where I got my research examples.
Okay, and right. Is it possible for an institution to add their own collection to these products? I think that means the access and build products.
Oh, that's not the way it's set up, although I will say that we do have product managers that are always looking at collections. And so if you have a collection that you're interested in having digitized, that's a different conversation. But from a cross-searchability standpoint, I'm not sure how that's not exactly how the plans are set up. So it's not like we could load up your content and then you could cross-search them with the other ProQuest content if that's the question. That's not really how the model's set up.
Okay, we had another question for the links to the article. So you said that's going to be in the presentation,
yeah.
Right?
It is. Yep, it's in the notes section of the presentation, the links to those different articles, yes.
What were the statistics you gave on liberal arts graduations now and in the past again? So I guess that's
Yeah, it was 1 in 20 in the 60s, and it's 1 in 5 today.
Okay. And then let's see, we have a comment of applause of a well-researched on a pertinent topic.
Thank you.
Okay, the use of primary sources in the Ithaca survey seems surprisingly high. It's asking how was defined primary sources, but that's the Ithaca survey, so I'm not sure if you have the definition there.
Yeah, I don't, but certainly we can look it up. I could probably pull up that, if you're talking about the 2012 survey, I can look that one up and see if in their notes, in their beginning, the write-up of the report, if they actually define what they call a primary source. Or if they left it open, they used the word primary source in the question text and didn't define it. So I can see if I can figure that out. So we'll do that as a follow-up.
Right, and the link to the survey again is in the presentation, so it's possible to also go directly to the survey and see it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. On the slides, yes, there are links to where we pulled from those Ithaca surveys. Yes.
And it looks like that is the last question or comment.
Okay. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. So the questions, the faculty question that was asked first is just it's a great question. And the other ones we need to do some follow-up to. They're at the point, and then Mark, you can correct me, I think we've done this before, is all the questions that were asked here today, we can provide a transcript of those at the same place where the recording is going to be posted. So then everybody has the benefit of getting the answers to the questions, not just the person who asked it. So we'll post a document there, of all the Q&A and the answers. So thank you for those questions.
So we have one more question that came in.
Sure.
Asking for more information on the methodology for analyzing which primary sources were used in the secondary sources.
Which primary?
I think the part of the answer, at least, is that we were just looking for the names of the source. So if it was a magazine, like that, right, Barb? Or in the Eric Myers research, it was a similar idea. He was looking for
they were looking for the citation of the New York Times or the Guardian, and similarly in our periodicals research, we were looking for those titles, any of the titles that showed up in those collections. So Education Magazine Archive, Religious Magazine Archive, those are collections of 20 some odd titles. And so we were seeing if any of those titles were showing up in citations in either dissertations or scholarly publications on the ProQuest platform. So that's kind of where we were looking there. And Dr. Meyer was looking in Scopus. So But I'm not. But Daniel, could you read the first part of that question? Because I wonder, are they asking us about how we defined primary sources in our own in the ProQuest research?
That was a different.
Okay.
I didn't see that particular question, but just it says which primary sources were used, the methodology for analyzing which primary sources, and I think it was mainly an issue of was a particular source cited in an article or a dissertation, or at least in the ProQuest research, but Meyer's research was different. And okay, now we're getting a lot more, and it's getting hard for me to keep up here. Let's see. Okay, this question is says, how can we advance this conversation in technical colleges where the focus is often on job acquisition and workforce development?
Well, I think there's some great evidence in what we found that, employers are looking for these skills as well. I mean, they think it's more important than their undergraduate degree. So they want to be able to develop these skills that humanities can bring to graduates, because these people eventually get into the workforce. So I think there's some good statistics in here that you can reuse. And I mean, there was no shortage of articles out there that make our point. And there's in the couple of papers that we're going to be sending as well, there might be some additional places that you can go get some more statistics. But I think that's an important point, I think.
So the papers that have been written by ProQuest, you're going to be sending out to the participants in the webinar?
Yes. Yeah, they'll be. So we're going to basically send you a thank you email, and you're going to be able to download those papers. And in those papers, there will probably be other citations that'll help just with some talking points or some more evidence to be able to have the conversations, in the departments of technology and other, and say, hey, this is why these things are important. Look at all this evidence here that says that these critical thinking skills, the ability to work with others, to write clearly, all those kinds of things are important for our students as they become graduates and eventual, they go out there in the world and get jobs.
Okay, so we just going back to the question before, we did clear that up, that we were looking for specific titles, so that's good. So the question about what, okay, so then we have another one here. A lot of our acquisition is from preemptive, even though we try our best to tailor it to prevailing teaching and research needs of students and faculty. Given that demand for these primary sources span different disciplines, yet they are marketed on a title-by-title basis. These packages, from what I've seen, are very expensive. So that's about the access.
Yeah, so that's why that's really one of the reasons why we tried to create these primary sources buying plans, is because we wanted institutions to have access to everything, as opposed to having to pick and choose. And so, because the collections do get expensive if you're trying to buy them one at a time. So that's why the plans, I'm actually going to back up to this slide here, offer everything we have, 350 plus odd products across the different content types, government docs, periodicals, books, archival, newspapers. So I think that's you either can get access to them and not own them, or you can just, you can do access and continue to purchase some of them if you feel like that they could get used in your institution over time. So hopefully that becomes some sort of a solution that's affordable. It's obviously much more affordable to buy access to all these products in a plan as opposed to subscribing to one at a time. So we've got lists of the different products that are in these plans. So like I said, I can provide more information for anyone who's interested in learning more about what's in these plans.
Okay, we have a question for where the recording will be posted.
Mark, you want to?
Sure, I'll jump in there. We'll post the recording for this webinar on the ACRL Choice YouTube channel, and we will also, so it's freely available there. I will also post it to our website. And I can grab the links to those 2 pages and put them in the chat for folks here. I will do that in just a moment.
And then Mark, just quickly, you'll be able to send us the transcripts of the Q&A so then we can actually make a document from them and make sure we get all questions properly answered.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep.
I want to make sure I follow up with everyone on everything with all the good questions being asked here today. Anything else,
Okay,
Daniel?
here's another. Yeah, there's lots of questions. Okay. Have you thought about creating packages for STEM that include a few humanities journals that are being used in the research?
Well, we do approach STEM schools, and they're part of the one of the plans. The flexibility of these plans is not everybody wants or needs 350 products, and so we've created plans that go as small as 50 products. So I think that they could easily pick and choose 50 products out of there that would be useful to STEM researchers, STEM departments, and if that's still too many. There's always the collection builder option where you can just pick the exact number that you want, but those are for purchase, not subscription. So we just have to try to figure out something that works. But every institution needs something a little bit different. So we're trying to respond to that, but still offer just a few number of plans to the marketplace. But let us know, talk to us about it, and we'll be happy to try to work something out with you.
Okay, we have, did you use text data mining to find the mentions of the sources?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, I didn't do the research myself, so Daniel, you did some research of it. What did you do?
It was all material that is on a ProQuest database or ProQuest platform, and we just did normal, a searching that any researcher would be able to do using the database.
Yeah, and I think
some
Eric
advanced
Myers,
searching. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was advanced searching, but not strictly text and data mining type of thing. I believe Eric Myers is the same. In fact, in his report, I believe he goes into the methodology of how he collected the data. So, like I said, I can give you the report, his SSRN report, and he'll go into that methodology section. But I don't believe it was like any text and data mining tools. He was just doing, searches on, in a basic or advanced search form on Scopus.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. There's the question from before we answered about technical colleges, but I think that one is, you answered that already, Barb.
Okay.
Do you have examples of assignments, types of assignments? Let's see. Okay. Sorry, I think another comment came in while I was reading that one and it disappeared. Let's see. Do you have examples of assignments, type of assignments that STEM faculty are using with these resources?
I don't, but we have other examples. That's kind of how our curriculum analysis started to begin with, which was Daniel was part of that, where he actually went and found examples by looking at course syllabi, and what assignments students would have, and then was able to match a resource directly to that assignment and said, hey, your student can use this product to actually write their paper. So it would just be a matter of us doing some research to be able to do that, is to go into some STEM courses where we can find syllabi and then see how products can be used too. And I think that those would be some really powerful examples to add to this particular set of slides here, some real life examples. So that's a great suggestion that I think that we could accommodate and potentially even put them in the slide deck, maybe in the appendix of the slide deck once the deck gets posted.
Okay, then we just have another request to see the various reports that you cited during your presentation.
Yep, absolutely. Definitely happy to share those. In fact, what I'll do as well in the appendix is I'll just go ahead and put all the links in to Dr. Myers' research that he did with ProQuest, so you don't have to request it. You can just go into the appendix and get the links. just making myself a note here on that one. Okay.
Okay, so then we have a follow-up to our methodology in some of the primary sources research, and it's what was the research question which goes with the data collection and analysis.
Yeah, let me just see if I have it here in my...
At least for the ProQuest the reports that ProQuest did, I think it was a fairly simple research question. It was, how widely are these sources being cited, and in what disciplines?
Yes, and the other research question in our own research, if that's the question, how did we word the question about getting at these different sources? And if this is not the question, you can just ignore this, but we asked, the question stated, you assign primary sources to your students, indicate the importance of each reason, and then we listed out the reasons. Reasons being develop critical thinking skills, provide a great understanding, and all those ones that I read through earlier. And then they were checking whether it was important on the importance scale. So if they answered any one of those primary sources in a previous question that said, tell us which of these resources you use to assign to students, there was a long list of content types. There's probably 35 different content types in the list. And then we just went through that list and said if any one of these are primary sources, so it was books, dissertations, government documents, historical periodicals, archival materials, newspapers, videos, musical scores, that sort of thing. Those kinds of content types we consider to be primary sources. And then they got the next question that said, now tell us why you assign those materials in your teaching. So that was the kind of the methodology of how we got to it in the ProQuest research. But again, I mean,
I think that's a good point too, Barb, because I think in the last questions we were focused more on the research papers, and of course you asked similar type questions in the survey you did. So there's two different things.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then we just have another vote for us to find the examples of STEM faculty using these resources.
Yeah, that would have been a really nice thing to have. It's a good idea. Sorry I didn't have these in here today, but that would have been a really nice real-life example. So, yes, we will find a couple of those and put some examples in the appendix for you so you can use those, because those are really powerful when you can go back to faculty and say, listen, here's a course, here's how these products could be used by your STEM students. So this is why they're important to have in the library. So yes, we'll definitely be looking for some examples for you to make that argument.
Oh, and there is one question I passed over which is related, and that is what was the name of the professor from Ryerson that you cited?
Yeah, his name, yes. Let me just, Lackman is his last name. Let me just get to it. I'm sorry, I'm flipping through my notes here. I'm further back. Hang on. Almost there, sorry. I should know this. Richard Lackman from Ryerson.
All right, great. Well, this is Mark. I'm going to jump in here just to make sure that we have time to say thank you to everybody and to wrap up here at the very end. Thanks everybody out there for hanging with us and staying on. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Barbara, and thank you, Daniel, for the presentation and the Q&A. I think we did wind up with a whole lot of questions, so that's great.
Yeah.
And
thank you very much for your time. Yeah, I appreciate everybody staying on and just asking your questions. So thank you very much for your time today.
Absolutely. And I would just remind folks that are out there, you should be able to see in the chat box there a link to a survey to let us know what you thought of the presentation today. It's only 5 questions. It shouldn't take you very long, so please do take a minute and fill that out for us. We would really appreciate it. And I guess the last thing that I will say here is just thank you to everyone out there for joining the presentation. We really appreciate your time, and we hope you'll join us again soon. All right, thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.